News. Last year, we took a close look at Charleston Police Department's overtime expenditures from fiscal years 2017 to 2023. During that time, the department spent more than $15 million in OT, averaging more than $2 million a year. In this Eyewitness News investigation, Kennie Bass checks the latest fiscal year's numbers to see if promised changes by the city administration has had an impact in the overtime bottom line.
From 2017 until the summer of 2023, the Charleston Police Department spent more than $15 million in overtime. That spending raised concerns from some former and current officers about the possibilities of waste, fraud, and abuse, and how spending could impact the department's pension plans. The city responded by having CPD implement new guidelines to try and keep OT costs down.
We nailed down an overtime policy. And of course, it was signed off, by the mayor's office, and we rolled with it. And at that point, we started really streamlining our process as far as work hours and workload. And of course, as you know, we have many, many events here in the city. It keeps the city moving, keeps everybody coming into the city. So obviously, we had to manage those expectations as well.
We did a review to make sure, are we doing everything that we can to make sure, two very important things. Yes, that we can make sure that we have the best policies and procedures in place for overtime, but also I need overtime covered. Take for instance, USA Cycling. When we had USA Cycling, which wasn't planned, it was something that we got. We had more police officers we needed for USA Cycling than we did for Regatta. Those are events that we are never going to turn down, but it's a lot of overtime.
Eyewitness News sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the city asking for police payroll records for the 2024 fiscal year. For the period ending last June, records show Investigative Services Bureau Chief Lieutenant Tony Hazlett claimed 1,762 hours of overtime, earning nearly $81,000 in additional pay. That's nearly 5 hours of overtime for every day of the year. Combined with his regular salary of $65,000, Hazlett's total FY24 compensation was more than $146,000. However, that number was about $31,000 less than what he made the previous fiscal year. Next on the list is Community Policing Bureau Chief Captain Mike Pridemore. For the last fiscal year, he claimed more than 1,400 hours of overtime, totaling nearly $74,000 OT dollars. While those numbers were down a bit from the previous fiscal year, Pridemore still managed to make $143,000. That's a couple $100 more this time around than last. Third on the list is former Deputy Chief Major John Garton. He now serves as Dunbar's police chief. But for his last full year in the capital city, Garton claimed nearly 1,500 hours of OT, generating nearly $70,000 in extra cash. While both the overtime hours and compensation are lower than the previous fiscal year, the top three earners all managed to double their annual pay with their additional OT. Both the chief of police and the city's mayor say there are valid reasons for the overtime spending.
Yes, we want to make sure that we are keeping control over our overtime, but I am never going to say no to overtime when we need it. Overtime needs covered for these special events, we're going to cover them. And we're going to pay officers for the hours that they work.
We looked at everything overtime, how it's put into the system, how it's managed, who gets to approve it, and then ultimately, I'm responsible for the overtime, ultimately. So I want to make sure my command staff and my senior staff knows what they're doing and knows the right process. And so then we initiated this overtime policy, and we started really seeing more efficient workloads, for one, and then two, our numbers have went down.
As for the rest of the highest earners, ranking from 4th to 10th on the OT list, they worked extra hours between 1,386 and 1,027, making a bonus amount between $47,000 to $54,000. Every one of the top 10 officers with overtime made six-figure salaries. City leaders say the priorities of some of the department's younger workers mirror those employed in other areas of city government, making it more likely that older, more veteran workers will take the OT.
This is what we know with this generation. Oh, by the way, I have a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old. You know what they're interested in? Experiences. Experiences with their spouses, experiences with their children and their families. I mean, long gone are the day, Kenny, that everybody thought success was just big houses and big fancy cars. That's not it as well. I mean, people want to spend quality time with their children. And by the way, this isn't just police. This is across the board as well, getting folks to work overtime.
A lot of our younger officers, just like me, when I was a younger officer, I had small kids, and I had, a family that was young, and we were constantly on the move with sports and travel, and so a lot of our younger officers now are in that situation, and sometimes they just can't work overtime.
Chief Dempsey is not eligible for overtime. Without that extra money, he's the 15th highest paid officer on the force. Last fiscal year, he made $105,000. Fiscal year 24's overtime hours were totaled at more than 73,000. That's approximately 4,700 less than the previous year. The cost in OT pay was $2,882,361. Another reduction, this time of about $106,000 from FY23.
I think that we do an exceptional job at events. And, if you look at the number of people that show up to a Charleston Sternwheel regatta with very limited incidents at all, it's because of the number of police officers that we have there. Holly Jolly Brawley, USA Cycling. And oh, by the way, it's not by accident that we have some of the lowest crime rates and the highest solve rates. That's because our officers are working it.
In Charleston, with this Eyewitness News investigation, I'm Kennie Bass.
We have more great Eyewitness News investigates right here. Subscribe and hit the bell notification to have the latest uploads delivered straight to you.